His ex-wife's sister appeared at his gate. She said, "I came to forgive you." The twin moons of Caldera. 9 hung low in the violet sky, casting long shadows across the salt flats. The air shimmered with heat from the solar rails that hummed beneath the surface, carrying cargo pods and traders across the endless desert. Tiny settlements clung to the edges of these flats like stubborn weeds, their neon signs buzzing faintly in the twilight. Here. Life moved slowly, measured by the rhythm of the moons and the blinking lights of the hovercraft that drifted above the horizon. Ella Vance tightened her grip on the small satchel slung over her shoulder. The bag contained little: a set of tools, a worn notebook her father had given her, and the last piece of a puzzle that had haunted her family for years. She had spent most of her 16 years in the quiet town of Dustspire, helping her father repair old mining droids and tinkering with small devices that no one else could understand. Her father, once a celebrated engineer, had vanished years ago, leaving behind whispers of forbidden designs and the kind of secrets that powerful people would kill to control. Tonight, those whispers had found her. The convoy appeared suddenly, like a shadow across the glowing salt flats. The vehicles were sleek, hovering just above the ground, their shapes unfamiliar even to Alara, who had grown up around mining transports and trade pods. They moved as one, silent and precise, until the nearest craft lowered a ramp. Before she could react, strong hands lifted her into the vehicle. The salt wind stung her face as the hovercraft took off, leaving the neon glow of Dustspire behind. Alara struggled, but her efforts were useless. Fear prickled at the edges of her mind, yet curiosity, sharper than terror, took root. Her captors were not ordinary thieves. Their movements were coordinated, their gestures careful, as though trained in some forgotten art. One of them, a tall figure cloaked in a long coat, spoke softly to her. "Don't be afraid. You're very important." The words only made her heart race faster. Important? For what? She thought of her father. Had someone come after him once more? Through her? As the craft sliced across the horizon, the stars above twisted like ribbons. It was not just the twin moons that were out of place tonight. A comet streaked past in an impossible curve, and for a moment Elara felt as if the universe itself was pulling her toward something unknown. Far across the salt flats, Rook Calder leaned against his plasma-laced lasso, staring at the glowing horizon. The cowboy was not young, but age had only sharpened his instincts. His hat shadowed a face lined by years of sun, dust, and long nights under alien skies. Rook was a courier, a traveler, and occasionally a rescuer. A man who rode the trails of Caldera, not for money, but for reasons he rarely shared. The comm tower crackled faintly, and Rook's ears perked. "Elara Vance has been taken." The voice was broken, almost lost in static, but the name was unmistakable. Rook's fingers brushed the edge of his coat where a small device hummed. He did not hesitate. His hoverbike roared to life, kicking up plumes of silver dust. If someone thought they could snatch the engineer's daughter without consequence, they had not reckoned with him. Inside the convoy, Alara had begun to calm herself. She studied her captors carefully, noticing the subtle signs of tension. They were professional, yes, but not cruel. No weapon seemed ready. That, oddly, made her feel both safer and more alert. She had learned from her father that observing your surroundings could sometimes be the most powerful tool in a dangerous situation. Her eyes drifted to the console near the front of the vehicle, glowing with pale green light. There were buttons she could not understand, wires snaking like silver vines. Her fingers itched, a part of her wanting to explore, to press, to see what this machine could do, but another part of her new caution was wiser. Time passed slowly. The convoy glided over salt flats, over canyons that glittered with crystalline deposits, past abandoned mining rigs that had not seen life in decades. Each mile took her farther from Dustspire, farther from safety, and yet closer to something she did not yet understand. Rook followed, weaving through the jagged canyons, his bike hovering barely above the ground. He did not chase like a fool, he anticipated. The convoy was fast, yes, but he knew the desert like the back of his hand. He knew where the winds could slow a craft, where the salt could crack its undercarriage, and where gravity anomalies might interfere with navigation. "Hold steady," he muttered to himself, adjusting the lasso at his side. It was not a rope, but a line of pure energy, capable of gripping and controlling almost anything. He did not plan to fight. He planned to outthink them. Back inside the convoy, Alara's mind wandered to her father. She remembered the small workshop where he had taught her to understand machines, not just as tools, but as puzzles. "Every problem," he had said, "has a solution, even when it seems impossible. The key is patience and creativity." Alara smiled faintly. Maybe this was the test. Maybe being taken, traveling across the moons, was not only danger but also a challenge, one she had been prepared for all her life. She began to notice patterns in the control panels, small anomalies, blinking lights that repeated in a sequence. She touched them, carefully, learning. Outside, the neon sky began to fade into a dark horizon. The twin moons glowed, casting silver light on the salt flats, reflecting off the metallic surfaces of the convoy. Rook's bike appeared as a shadow on the edge of the convoy's sensors. A flicker passed across the pilot's console, a warning almost too small to notice. Elara's eyes widened. She had just manipulated one of the panels, not knowing exactly what she would trigger, and yet the craft responded, slowing slightly, veering toward a narrow canyon. The captors murmured among themselves, clearly confused by the sudden adjustment. Somewhere far behind, Rook's grin was hidden beneath the shadow of his hat. I knew she was trying. The night deepened, and stars shimmered like scattered diamonds across the alien sky. For Elara, fear had not left her, but it had changed. It had become sharper, edged with curiosity, a hunger to survive not by running, but by understanding. For Rook, the chase was no longer simple duty. He could feel the puzzle coming together. He had chased many things in his life, cargo, rumors, lost travelers, but this felt bigger. Something about Elara, about her father's inventions, the strange humming convoy, it all promised a story that could change the frontier forever. And the night had only just begun. The convoy moved like a ghost over the silver salt flats, its engines whispering against the still night. Elara sat quietly, her small hands resting on the edge of the control panel she had begun to explore. The blinking lights, the patterns, the strange hum of circuits, everything felt familiar now, as if she could almost speak the machine's language. She had learned from her father that understanding a machine was not about force. It was about observation, patience, and a willingness to listen. She leaned closer, her fingers hovering over a row of tiny switches. One careful press here, another there, and the craft gave a faint shudder. Not dangerous, just enough to hint that something was changing. The captors noticed it immediately. "Check the controls," the tall figure said, his voice sharp but not angry. Their movements were precise, but for the first time there was tension in the air. They scanned the panels, but Elara had already learned which buttons to avoid. She wasn't trying to fight. She was trying to steer the situation. Outside, the canyon's walls glowed faintly with salt crystal reflections. This was one of the few places on Caldera, 9, where gravity behaved strangely. Hovercraft engines often slipped or struggled here. If someone knew the tricks of the canyon, they could slow a pursuing vehicle or hide from it entirely. Rook Calder knew. He had slowed his bike as he approached the canyon entrance, studying the terrain carefully. Dust stirred along the slopes, glimmering in the light of the twin moons. His eyes scanned every ridge, every rock formation. He didn't need speed. He needed strategy. "Come on, girl," he muttered under his breath. "Time to show me what you've got." He had noticed the changes in the convoy's movement. Subtle shifts, tiny hesitations, like the vehicle was being guided from the inside. Someone inside was clever. Someone inside understood machines, and Rook knew that cleverness could tip the balance faster than any chase. Inside the convoy, Elara kept her movements slow and deliberate. Her captors had begun to suspect her meddling, but she had anticipated that. She didn't need to escape immediately. She needed to give them just enough control to feel secure, while she quietly prepared a plan. She studied the map display on the console. The convoy's route would take them over a series of hovering bridges, old mining platforms, and abandoned droid depots. It was dangerous if miscalculated, but to someone who knew the terrain, it offered opportunities. Elara's heart beat faster with a strange mix of fear and excitement. She was no longer just a passenger. She was an actor in the story, a participant with choices. Rook rode into the canyon, his hover bike gliding just above the salt-crusted ground. He followed the trail left by the convoy, small vibrations in the surface giving him hints about their direction. Occasionally he would glance at the night sky, noting the stars and the position of the twin moons. Caldera, 9's deserts, shifted with strange magnetic currents, and the stars often helped him correct his path when instruments failed. He smiled faintly. The girl wasn't just clever, she was patient. And patience, he knew, could turn the tide of any challenge. The convoy slowed unexpectedly, and Elara realized why. Ahead, the canyon narrowed sharply, almost forming a tunnel. One wrong move could trap the vehicle. She tapped a few switches, rerouted minor power flows, and watched the convoy slide gracefully into the narrow path. The captors exchanged confused glances. They had never seen anyone handle the craft like this, Alara whispered to herself. Just a little further. It wasn't rebellion. It was control. It was strategy. And it was exactly what Rook was hoping to see. Rook observed from a ridge above. He could see the convoy weaving through the canyon, and he noticed the slight hesitation in its movements. Someone inside was directing it. He grinned under his hat. This was no ordinary chase. It was a test of wits, and he loved a good test. He adjusted his lasso, preparing to use it not as a weapon but as a tool. With the plasma line, he could influence the convoy's engines remotely, nudge them, slow them down, or redirect without ever touching the vehicle. But first, he wanted to see the girls work. Inside the convoy, Alara had noticed the shadow on the ridge, the faint outline of a hovering bike. Her heart jumped. Someone was following them. Not a random traveler, but someone skilled. She realized immediately help had arrived. Her mind raced. How could she signal without revealing too much? She tapped a sequence on the panel, a simple rhythm that only someone who knew machines could notice. The engine hummed a slightly different tone, subtle, almost musical. She waited. Rook saw it, a faint pulse in the convoy's engine pattern. The rhythm confirmed it. The girl knew what she was doing, and more importantly, she wasn't afraid. The canyon widened, and the convoy's route took it over a long, suspended bridge, lit faintly by residual solar panels. The bridge creaked softly under the craft's weight, and Alara felt a thrill she couldn't explain. For the first time, she wasn't thinking of being captured. She was thinking of navigating the impossible. Rook followed carefully, keeping his distance. He wanted her to do it on her own. The girl was clever, and cleverness needed room to grow. Alara adjusted the course slightly, taking the bridge at an angle the captors had not considered. The craft shivered slightly, but stayed on track. The captors' faces reflected fear for the first time, not at her, but at the impossible precision of her guidance. Night deepened over the desert, and the twin moons cast long silver shadows across the salt flats below. Alara realized she was no longer just playing with circuits. She was playing with fate. Each switch, each adjustment, each observation was a step toward freedom, or at least toward control over her own journey. She caught glimpses of Rook occasionally, a shadow moving smoothly along ridges and slopes. His presence was reassuring. Somehow she knew he would arrive when needed, but he was letting her prove herself first. The convoy approached a series of abandoned droid depots. Cracked metal walls rose from the salt flats, old signs flickering faintly. These were dangerous places, unstable and unfamiliar, but Alara saw an opportunity. She whispered to herself, now. With careful hands, she rerouted minor energy flows, opened maintenance panels, and created small delays in the engines. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to slow the convoy slightly and make navigation tricky. The captors were distracted, checking systems, unaware that the girl inside had already begun shaping the path. Outside, Rook noticed the changes immediately. A flick of his wrist, a tap of the lasso's controls, and the convoy responded, nudged gently, safely. No harm done. The chase had become a dance, a silent coordination between the cowboy and the girl he had yet to meet properly. Hours passed like this, tension and strategy weaving together in the silence of the desert night. The convoy was clever, the captors alert, and the girl inside growing more confident. Rook's presence was felt but not seen, guiding subtly, allowing her to take the lead. Finally, the convoy stopped near a narrow canyon exit just as the first faint light of dawn touched the horizon. The captors consulted nervously, unsure why the craft had slowed, unsure how the girl inside seemed to anticipate every obstacle. Alara took a deep breath, her hands resting lightly on the panel. She had done it. She had taken control without resistance, without force, and without revealing her full plan. She could feel the tension in the air, the quiet change. The captors were no longer fully in command. Rook smiled beneath his hat. She was ready. The twin moons faded into the morning sky, leaving a horizon streaked with pink and gold. For Alara, the night had been a lesson in patience, observation, and courage. She had learned that even in captivity, cleverness could create freedom. And far above the salt flats, Rook called her prepared for the next move. The convoy would not escape, not with the girl inside and the cowboy on her trail. The chase was not yet over, but for the first time the path forward was bright with possibility. The first rays of Caldera, Nine's twin suns, painted the salt flats in gold and copper, reflecting off the crystal formations scattered across the desert. The convoy moved slowly now, navigating carefully as the canyon widened. Alara had sensed the change in her captors. They were no longer confident, and she could feel the shift in control. Her hands rested lightly on the console, ready to act at the right moment. Ahead, the canyon opened into a hidden plateau, where an old research outpost rested half buried under sand and metal. The place had been abandoned for decades, yet it held the remnants of her father's secret work, the forbidden jump technology that had caused all the trouble. This was the destination the captors had been aiming for. Alara knew instinctively that the standoff would happen here. She took a deep breath, calming herself. The last night of running and planning had prepared her for this. She was ready to face what came next, not with fear, but with cleverness. Outside, Rook Calder hovered silently on a ridge, watching. He had followed the convoy for hours, guiding subtly, using his lasso only when necessary. Now the canyon opened wide, and the research outpost came into view. Its metal walls glimmered in the morning light, half covered by sand and dust. The place was eerie, quiet, but full of potential. Rook studied the terrain carefully. There were entrances, maintenance corridors, and old observation towers. This was the perfect place to intervene, not with violence, but with intelligence. He adjusted his lasso, preparing to manipulate small mechanisms if needed. He had no doubt about one thing. Alara could handle herself. The girl inside that convoy was clever, observant, and patient, and now she would have to prove it. Inside the convoy, Alara's mind raced. Her fingers danced lightly across the console, opening panels and checking the systems she had learned to understand over the past hours. The captors spoke quietly among themselves, but their words no longer carried authority. Alara noticed their fear and hesitation. She realized they underestimated her. The research outpost was old, its corridors narrow, its machinery rusted and blinking faintly from stored solar energy. Yet it held secrets her father had left behind, plans, protocols, and a device designed to prevent anyone from misusing his jump technology. That device was now her responsibility. Her eyes scanned the console. A sequence of lights blinked in a pattern she recognized, her father's signature touch. She could activate it, she could secure the outpost, she could finally change the course of the events that had trapped her for so long. Their hovercraft descended slowly, engines buzzing against the heat of the rising suns. They were cautious, but the confidence they carried at night had faded. They sensed the change inside the convoy. The girl was no longer helpless. Alara waited, her mind working quickly. She opened a maintenance panel, rearranging energy flows to subtly slow the engines. The hovercraft shivered slightly, enough to make her captors pause. They checked the readings, uncertain, while Alara guided the craft safely toward the plateau. Rook, watching from above, smiled faintly. She was clever, faster and sharper than he had imagined. He didn't intervene yet. The girl needed to see her own abilities fully. Finally, the convoy came to rest at the edge of the plateau. The captors stepped out, glancing at the abandoned research outpost. They were confident in their plan. They thought the girl would have no choice but to cooperate. Alara stepped forward. She was no longer afraid. She didn't confront them with anger or defiance. Instead, she moved calmly, walking toward the outpost, gesturing at the controls she had just prepared. "You don't need to fight me," she said softly. "I can guide this, but if you want my cooperation, you have to listen, not threaten." Her voice was steady even as her heart raced. The captors paused, surprised by her calmness. They had expected fear, perhaps pleading, maybe hesitation, but not this. Rook watched, noting every detail. This was her moment. She needed to show that cleverness and patience could be more powerful than intimidation. Inside the outpost, Alara moved quickly. She opened old control panels, studied blinking lights, and followed patterns she had memorized from her father's notes. Each system she activated hummed softly, a reminder that her father had prepared for this eventuality. The captors tried to assert control, moving toward her, but she anticipated their actions. Each time they stepped closer, she redirected systems to create small delays, subtle diversions, harmless but effective. She was guiding them, guiding the convoy, guiding the situation. Rook adjusted his lasso slightly, nudging energy flows from above. The hovercraft and the outpost's machinery responded seamlessly. No confrontation, no harm, just clever navigation of the situation. Alara finally reached the central console, the heart of the outpost. It glowed faintly, awaiting input. She recognized the protocol immediately, the device her father had created to secure the jump technology. She knew what to do. "You've underestimated me," she said softly as she tapped in the correct sequence. The lights on the console shifted, changed color, and a soft hum filled the room. The device activated, not dangerous, not destructive, but securing the outpost from misuse. The captors froze. They had expected fear, defiance, perhaps a struggle. Instead, the girl had outsmarted them. Their leverage was gone. Outside, Rook landed quietly near the edge of the plateau. He watched the captors glance at each other, uncertain, then looked toward the convoy. Their confidence had vanished. The girl inside had claimed control. Rook stepped forward slowly, tipping his hat. "Looks like you've done well," he said. His voice carried across the plateau, calm and steady. Alara turned, noticing the figure approaching. Recognition sparked in her eyes. She had felt his presence during the chase, guiding her subtly, giving her confidence. Now she saw him fully. A cowboy, yes, but also someone who understood that cleverness and patience mattered more than force. The captors hesitated, unsure what to do next. Alara held up her hand. "You have two choices," she said softly. "You can leave, quietly, without harm. Or you can stay and witness something you can never control." They glanced at each other, then at the secure console. Slowly, cautiously, they nodded. They had no desire to remain here, no desire to challenge a girl who had outsmarted them and taken control of the situation. Alara exhaled softly. She had done it. The outpost was secure. Her father's legacy was protected. And she had discovered a new truth about herself. Courage was not about confrontation. It was about intelligence, patience, and the ability to act at the right moment. Rook watched from nearby, impressed. He had seen many chases, many clever people, but the girl in this convoy had exceeded all expectations. She had proven that even in captivity, cleverness could create freedom. And now, with the twin suns rising fully over the desert, the frontier seemed brighter than it had in years. Alara turned to Rook, a small smile forming. "Thank you," she said. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance." Rook tipped his hat again. "You did it all yourself," he replied. "I just made sure you stayed on the right trail." For the first time, Alara felt a sense of pride that had nothing to do with her father. She had earned her own victory, carved her own path, and changed the outcome of events that had seemed impossible to alter. The twin suns climbed higher, illuminating the salt flats and the abandoned research outpost. The convoy had gone quiet, and the captors had retreated. Alara stepped outside, feeling the warmth of the suns on her face. She looked toward the horizon, imagining all the possibilities that lay ahead. Rook mounted his bike, ready to ride again. "Where will you go from here?" he asked. Alara smiled, a new determination shining in her eyes. "I think it's time to build something new," she said. "A place where knowledge is free and people can explore safely. No running, no hiding, just discovery." Rook nodded, understanding immediately. "Then I'll see you on that trail," he said, tipping his hat one last time before riding toward the horizon. Alara watched him go, feeling a sense of calm she had never known. The outpost was safe. Her father's work was secure, and her future, her destiny, was finally hers to shape. The twin suns bathed the desert in light, and for the first time in a long while, everything seemed possible. The plateau of the abandoned research outpost gleamed under the twin suns of Caldera, 9, casting long shadows over the salt flats below. The morning air was still, carrying only the faint hum of dormant machines and the soft rustle of crystallized sand. Alara Vance stood at the edge of the plateau, breathing deeply. The events of the past hours had felt impossible, yet here she was, alive, in control, and free from the weight of her father's past. The convoy was gone. Her captors had left quietly, their confidence replaced by confusion and awe. They had come expecting a frightened girl to surrender her father's secrets, but instead, she had outwitted them. The outpost's systems now hummed under her guidance, safe and secure. Her father's jump technology, once a dangerous secret, had been locked away in a way that ensured no one could misuse it, but still allowed exploration for those who sought knowledge with care. Alara walked inside the outpost, her hands brushing over the consoles that had once intimidated her. She felt the subtle vibrations beneath her fingertips and smiled. Everything her father had taught her, the patience, the observation, the understanding of machines, had brought her here. She had realized something important. Courage was not about confrontation. Courage was about understanding and acting wisely when no one expected it. Far above, a shadow moved over the canyon ridge. Rook had returned, quietly observing. The cowboy had been the silent guardian during the chase, guiding her subtly, but now he only watched. Alara didn't need saving. She had done this herself. And yet, Rook knew his presence was a comfort. In the vastness of Caldera, 9. Having someone who understood the rhythm of the frontier, even from a distance, could make all the difference. Rook tipped his hat, acknowledging her victory. He did not approach immediately, allowing her the space to feel the full weight of her accomplishments. Watching her, he thought about how rare it was to find someone with such patience and cleverness in a universe that rewarded speed and force. Alara was a different kind of hero, not the type who fought with weapons, but the type who fought with wisdom and understanding. Alara had already begun planning. The outpost was abandoned, yet it had potential. There were solar panels to repair, corridors to clear, and old communication systems to restore. She imagined a place where travelers, engineers, and explorers could come safely, where ideas could be shared freely without fear of misuse or control, a place where knowledge was a path forward, not a weapon. Her eyes drifted to the horizon, to the endless salt flats stretching toward twin moons that now glimmered faintly above the rising suns. This was her frontier. Dustspire had been home, but this outpost, remote, lonely, and yet filled with possibility, was her new beginning. She could feel it in her bones. She had the tools, the mind, and the courage to shape the future herself. Rook descended the ridge, landing softly on the salt flats a short distance from the outpost. Alara watched him approach, her heart calm but her curiosity piqued. He carried no weapons, only his lasso and the quiet confidence of someone who had ridden the deserts of Caldera, 9 for decades. "You did well," he said simply, tipping his hat. "Better than I expected." Alara smiled, her gaze steady. "I couldn't have done it without knowing someone was out there," she said. "But I think I could have managed anyway." Rook chuckled softly. "I never doubted that," he said. "You have the mind for this frontier and the patience to make it last. That's more important than any weapon or chase." For a moment they stood quietly, gazing out at the endless desert. The twin suns bathed the world in warm light, and the salt flats reflected that brilliance back into the sky. It was peaceful, almost unreal, after the tension of the past day. Alara led Rook inside the outpost, showing him the consoles, the energy cores, and the old storage rooms. She explained the subtle adjustments she had made to the systems, how she had guided the convoy, and how she had activated her father's protocols to secure the technology. Rook listened, impressed. "You've thought of everything," he said finally. "This place, it could be more than just a safe haven. It could be the start of something new for the frontier." Alara nodded. She had already imagined it. She saw travelers arriving from distant moons, engineers exchanging ideas, children learning about machines, and explorers preparing for journeys beyond the stars. The outpost would no longer be a place of secrets or fear. It would be a place of possibility. Days passed quickly. Alara worked tirelessly, repairing systems, clearing old corridors, and testing the jump technology protocols her father had left behind. She learned more about the machines with each passing hour. Every adjustment, every solution brought her closer to understanding the full scope of her father's work, and the potential to use it for discovery rather than control. Rook came by frequently, offering advice, occasionally assisting with heavy repairs, but mostly observing. He never interfered with her work. He understood that this was her triumph, her legacy to shape. And though the frontier was vast, he had a way of appearing just when she needed guidance, always subtle, always thoughtful. The twin moons rose in the sky one evening, casting silver light across the outpost. Alara stood on the plateau, looking out at the horizon. She remembered the night she had been taken, the fear, the uncertainty, and the feeling of helplessness. Now she felt empowered, free, and ready to choose her own path. Her father's legacy was no longer a weight upon her shoulders. It was a guide, a set of lessons that had brought her to this moment, and she knew that the choices she made now would shape not only her future, but the future of anyone who came to this outpost seeking knowledge. Rook approached her quietly, his hat tilted against the moonlight. "You're ready," he said softly. Alara turned, smiling. "I think so," she replied. "This place, it's more than I imagined, and I know I can make it better."
Rook nodded. "Then I'll leave you to it," he said.
"The frontier needs people like you, clever, patient, and brave without needing to fight. Thank you for helping me see that," she said. "For showing me the trail, even when I didn't know I needed guidance." Rook tipped his hat one last time. "The trail is always there," he said. "Sometimes you just need to learn to ride it yourself." And with that, he rode off into the distance, leaving her to the rising twin suns and the possibilities they promised. Alara returned to the outposts, looking at the systems she had secured. She activated the communications array, sending signals to distant trade posts and neighboring settlements. She invited travelers, explorers, and engineers to come, not for profit, not for control, but to share knowledge, explore, and create. Word spread quickly. Soon, ships arrived from moons she had never even seen. Travelers shared ideas, engineers repaired old devices, and children marveled at the technology in the open skies. The outpost became a hub of learning and discovery, a place where curiosity was celebrated and fear had no place. Alara stood on the plateau one evening watching the ships land against the backdrop of twin moons and the orange glow of sunset. She felt a deep sense of pride. This was her frontier, her choice, her legacy. And as the days passed, Rook's presence remained a quiet memory, a shadow on the ridge, a whisper in the wind. He had shown her the way, but she had ridden the trail herself. She had transformed from a girl fleeing her father's past into a leader shaping her own future. The twin suns set, the moons rose, and the stars stretched endlessly above. The desert was quiet, yet full of possibility. Alara smiled, feeling the hum of the outpost beneath her fingertips, the pulse of discovery in the air, and the certainty that the frontier would never be the same. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and expectation. She had guided herself through every challenge. And now she was free. Not from danger alone, but free to choose, to create, and to explore. The dust had settled, but the stars remained. And beneath them, Alara's story was only just beginning.